Clear the runway, Mustang inbound.
Chocks away, clear to taxi!
January 17th, 1944. The dawn breaks over the frost-bitten fields of northern France. A bitter wind cuts across the landing strips of an Allied airbase, rattling loose panels and stirring clouds of exhaust smoke. In the hangars, mechanics scurry, checking gauges and tightening bolts, their breath fogging in the cold. The rumble of engines grows, low at first, then rising in pitch, a chorus of mechanical fury that shakes the ground beneath them. Above, the sky is a vast, pale canvas. Messerschmitt Bf 109s, sleek and familiar, sweep over occupied territory with the confidence of hunters. German pilots, cocky and precise, scan the horizon for the silver shadows of Allied bombers. They laugh at the thought of any new American fighter being a real threat. Then, piercing the gray morning, a formation of P-51 Mustangs appears. Long noses glinting, Merlin engines singing a different tune, they slice through the clouds with a speed that seems impossible. German eyes widen. The wind, the roar, the tension, everything is about to change. In that instant, the balance of the air war is quietly shifting. The stage is set. By the winter of 1943, the skies over Europe were a theater of relentless conflict. The Allied bomber forces, primarily the United States Army Air Force's 8th Air Force and the Royal Air Force, were mounting an increasingly aggressive campaign against German industrial and military targets. Factories in the Ruhr, oil refineries in Ploiești, and transportation hubs across occupied Europe were under constant threat. The goal was clear: cripple the German war machine from the air and pave the way for eventual ground invasions. Yet for all their determination, the Allies faced a severe challenge. German air power, honed by years of war, maintained a dangerous superiority in many sectors. The Luftwaffe's Messerschmitt Bf 109s and Focke-Wulf FW-190s were formidable opponents, agile and deadly, with experienced pilots who had been hardened in combat over France, the Low Countries, and the Eastern Front. Their tactics were ruthless: high-speed dives, tight turning maneuvers, and coordinated attacks against bomber formations. For each Allied bomber that ventured deep into enemy territory, the risk was immense. Losses mounted, not just in aircraft, but in the lives of the crews, who flew missions with the constant knowledge that survival was far from guaranteed. Escort fighters had long been part of Allied strategy, but the technology at the time imposed limitations. Early American fighters, like the P-38 Lightning and P-47 Thunderbolt, were fast and powerful, but struggled to accompany bombers on the longest missions into Germany. Range was the critical issue. Bombers flying beyond 200 to 250 miles from their bases often lost their protective escorts, leaving them exposed to the Luftwaffe's deadly interception tactics. The human cost was staggering. Reports from late 1943 missions revealed bomber loss rates, sometimes exceeding 20% on a single deep raid. Losses unsustainable for a force that relied on both manpower and morale. Meanwhile, the Luftwaffe, despite facing attrition on multiple fronts, held a psychological edge. German pilots operated in familiar skies, knew the terrain, and had honed their instincts to deadly precision. Intercepting a formation of heavily laden bombers became second nature. Even less experienced pilots learned quickly from veterans who taught techniques to exploit blind spots, anticipate bomber gunners, and minimize risk to their own aircraft. Air superiority in these contested zones was far from absolute, but enough to keep the Allies on edge, to demand innovation, and to force a reevaluation of tactics. On the ground, planners understood the problem, but were constrained by the technology available. The concept of long-range escort fighters was still developing, a solution sought for years without complete success. Engineers experimented with drop tanks, tried to extend operational reach. Pilots and commanders debated the trade-offs between speed, firepower, and endurance. Every flight revealed limitations. Engines overheating on long hauls, fuel consumption higher than predicted, and weapon systems often inadequate against agile Luftwaffe fighters. Each mission became a careful balance between audacity and survival. At the same time, Allied leadership recognized the strategic stakes. Losing the air war over Europe could stall the entire liberation effort. Without control of the skies, any large-scale invasion, including the anticipated D-Day landings, would be perilously vulnerable. The pressure mounted, and the search for a solution intensified. It was not enough to rely on courage alone. The Allies needed a plane that could match and exceed the capabilities of the Luftwaffe's finest. One that could escort bombers deep into Germany, engage enemy fighters on even terms, and restore the fragile balance of air dominance. It was within this context of relentless bombing campaigns, high pilot attrition, and a Luftwaffe confident in its abilities that the stage was set for the introduction of a new fighter. A machine designed not merely to compete, but to redefine the rules of aerial warfare. The P-51 Mustang, born of necessity and engineered for endurance and speed, would soon confront the very pilots who had once laughed at the idea of an American plane threatening their dominance. This mounting tension and technological race would soon collide in the skies, reshaping the air war over Europe in ways neither side could have predicted. The P-51 Mustang began as a response to a simple yet urgent problem. The Allies lacked a long-range fighter capable of escorting bombers deep into German airspace. North American Aviation, a company with no prior experience in frontline fighter design, received the contract in 1940 to build what would initially be called the NA-73X. The aircraft's early prototypes featured the Allison V-1710 engine, reliable at low altitudes, but limited above 15,000 feet, a critical shortcoming for bomber escort missions over continental Europe, where most dogfights occurred at high altitude. Despite this limitation, the Mustang's design impressed engineers and military planners alike. Its laminar flow wing reduced drag, granting higher speeds and greater fuel efficiency. The fuselage was sleek, aerodynamic, and surprisingly stable at high velocity. Long-range fuel tanks could be fitted without compromising maneuverability, and its 6.50 caliber M2 Browning machine guns provided formidable firepower. But the true game-changer came with a pivotal engineering collaboration: the integration of the British Rolls-Royce Merlin engine. The Merlin-powered P-51B and P-51C models transformed the Mustang from a competent aircraft into a world-class fighter. The engine delivered exceptional performance at high altitudes, allowing the Mustang to match, and often exceed, the speed and climb rate of Germany's premier fighters, the Bf-109 and FW-190. Its operational range extended to nearly 1,500 miles with drop tanks, finally solving the long-range escort problem that had plagued the USAF for years. For bomber crews, the Mustang became more than a machine. It was a promise of protection, a silver shadow in the sky that could deter or destroy any interceptor. Initial deployments in late 1943 met with cautious optimism. Early missions over Italy and southern Europe allowed American pilots to test the Mustang in real combat conditions, revealing its strengths and weaknesses. Pilots quickly discovered its remarkable acceleration and agility at altitude, which allowed them to engage Luftwaffe fighters on equal terms and then disengage at will. The aircraft's superior speed at high altitude meant German pilots had to rethink their approach. Diving on a Mustang no longer guaranteed a quick kill. The first encounters with German pilots revealed a subtle but significant shift in morale. Luftwaffe veterans, accustomed to dominating the skies, were startled by the Mustang's performance. Reports from the front described Allied fighters appearing out of nowhere, closing in on formations of Messerschmitts, and then retreating before retaliation could be effective. German intelligence noted the change with increasing concern, questioning whether their existing tactics could counter this unexpected threat. For Allied commanders, the Mustang represented hope, a tool that could finally tip the scales of air superiority in their favor. The timing of the Mustang's introduction was critical. By early 1944, Allied bombing campaigns had escalated in both frequency and scale. Strategic targets deep within Germany required constant protection. The 8th Air Force, operating from bases in England, was pushing missions that took bombers well beyond the range of older escort fighters. Without a reliable long-range solution, losses would continue to mount, potentially undermining public confidence in a larger war effort. The Mustang's arrival addressed this gap precisely when it was most needed, offering the first practical means to provide continuous coverage for deep penetration rates. Yet, the path to mastery in combat was not immediate. Pilots had to adapt to the Mustang's distinct handling characteristics. Its laminar flow wing offered high-speed performance, but could behave unpredictably at low speeds, requiring precision on takeoff and landing. Fuel management was critical during long sorties, and pilots had to learn to exploit the aircraft's strengths while avoiding overextension. Despite these challenges, the combination of speed, range, firepower, and high-altitude capability quickly earned the Mustang a reputation as a formidable adversary. By the spring of 1944, the stage was fully set. American bomber formations would soon fly into German territory under the watchful escort of P-51 Mustangs. The Luftwaffe, once confident in its ability to intercept and destroy Allied bombers, now faced a new reality. A fighter that could not only keep pace, but outmatch their own aircraft in key performance areas. For the first time, the balance of power in the European skies was genuinely at risk, and German pilots would soon discover that their confidence could be their undoing. This transition from planning and development to combat deployment sets the stage for the multiple perspectives and human experiences that define the Mustang's impact in the air war. The angles of human, tactical, technological, and leadership responses. For the men who flew the P-51 Mustang, the sky was no longer an overwhelming gauntlet, but a domain they could control. American pilots, many of them young and relatively inexperienced, quickly recognized the psychological edge the Mustang provided. Unlike earlier fighters that forced them to cling desperately to bombers for protection, the Mustang allowed pilots to maneuver with confidence. They could engage the enemy, dive for speed, and retreat to regroup, all while maintaining formation integrity. First-hand accounts describe the transformation vividly. In letters and diaries, pilots spoke of the exhilaration of climbing above the clouds, feeling the engine roar and the aircraft respond instantly to every control input. The sense of empowerment was intoxicating, a combination of skill, courage, and superior machinery. This confidence was not merely ego. It had life-or-death implications. A pilot who understood the Mustang's strengths could survive encounters that would have been fatal in an older fighter. The human factor, bravery informed by capability, became a decisive element in air combat over Europe. The Mustang's introduction also revolutionized air tactics. Bomber formations, previously vulnerable once out of range of escort fighters, could now venture deep into Germany with sustained protection. Commanders developed new strategies: long-range escort patrols, staggered formations, and coordinated attack sweeps designed to intercept Luftwaffe fighters before they could reach the bombers. Dogfights evolved as well. German pilots had perfected hit-and-run tactics against slower or shorter-range escorts, diving on bombers and disappearing before retaliation. With the Mustang, these tactics lost their edge. Mustang pilots could climb, turn, and accelerate at altitudes where the Bf-109s once dominated. Engagements shifted from desperate survival maneuvers to calculated exchanges. Reports noted that Luftwaffe pilots were increasingly cautious, sometimes retreating rather than risking a direct clash. Tactical innovation combined with technological superiority to create an environment where the Allies could dictate the terms of combat. At the heart of the Mustang's success was its engineering. The laminar flow wing, a relatively new aerodynamic concept, reduced drag and improved speed and range. Coupled with the Merlin engine, optimized for high-altitude performance, the P-51 could outpace nearly any German interceptor at critical altitudes. Fuel capacity, extended with drop tanks, allowed the fighter to escort bombers on missions exceeding 1,400 miles, a feat impossible for previous Allied aircraft. Weapons systems, too, were meticulously designed. 6.50 caliber Browning machine guns, distributed along the wing, offered high firepower without significantly impairing aerodynamics. Pilots could unleash sustained volleys against enemy fighters or bombers with remarkable accuracy. Combined with the aircraft's speed and maneuverability, this firepower made the Mustang a lethal adversary in both offensive and defensive operations. Engineers had not simply built a plane. They had created a versatile tool of war that could change the dynamics of air supremacy. These three angles, human experience, tactical innovation, and technological mastery, converged to define the early impact of the Mustang on the European air war. Pilots trusted their machines, commanders adapted strategies, and engineers' innovations proved decisive. But the story was far from complete. The psychological and moral dimension of this aircraft, the response of enemy leadership, and the broader consequences of its deployment would further reveal how one fighter could alter the balance in the skies. The impact of the P-51 Mustang extended beyond the cockpit. It reshaped decisions in command rooms thousands of feet below the front lines. Allied leadership understood that air superiority was not simply a matter of aircraft numbers, but of strategic allocation. General Henry H. Hap Arnold and Colonel Curtis LeMay recognized the potential of the Mustang to change the escort paradigm. They began deploying it in long-range missions that would have been unthinkable with older fighters. Commanders weighed risk against reward meticulously. Mustang escorts could reach targets deep within the Ruhr or Berlin, protecting vulnerable bomber streams that had previously suffered devastating losses. Eisenhower and the Allied High Command understood that sustained bomber campaigns were essential to weakening German industry ahead of a planned ground invasion. The Mustang's capabilities allowed them to commit to these operations with greater confidence, fundamentally altering strategic planning. Meanwhile, Luftwaffe leaders, such as General Adolf Galland, faced the challenge of rethinking tactics and resource deployment. Their once dominant Bf-109s and Fw-190s could no longer guarantee control of contested airspace, forcing rapid adaptation in both training and combat strategy. German pilots and intelligence officers were initially skeptical of reports regarding the Mustang. Early reconnaissance suggested another typical American fighter, slower and predictable. But field reports quickly contradicted these assumptions. Luftwaffe pilots flying over northern France and the Low Countries encountered Mustangs that could outpace them in level flight, climb faster, and maintain maneuverability at altitudes where the Bf-109 had previously excelled. The shock was tangible. Veteran pilots reported in after-action debriefs that the Mustangs appeared out of nowhere and could disengage almost at will. Morale, once a source of confidence, became a fragile edge. Tactics that had worked for years, dive attacks, slashing runs through bomber formations, now required recalibration. Some Luftwaffe squadrons attempted to introduce specialized units or alter engagement altitudes, but the Mustang's combination of speed, range, and high-altitude performance consistently outclassed their efforts. The psychological impact of facing an aircraft they could neither outrun nor easily outfight was as significant as the material losses incurred. The Mustang's introduction created a dual psychological effect. For American bomber crews, the sight of a silver Mustang glinting in the sunlight was a profound relief. Pilots described a renewed sense of security, their nerves steadied by the knowledge that their escorts could engage enemy fighters effectively. Confidence translated into performance. Bomber formations flew tighter, navigated more precisely, and suffered fewer losses. Conversely, German pilots experienced a growing sense of unease. Encounters with Mustangs introduced uncertainty into missions that had once been routine. Even the most experienced Luftwaffe veterans began to hesitate, weighing the risk of attack against the possibility of ambush by a faster, more capable aircraft. Reports from early 1944 note moments where formations of Bf 109s would break off attacks, not because of overwhelming numbers, but from fear of pursuit and loss. Over time, this erosion of confidence altered the conduct of the Luftwaffe, reducing aggressiveness and increasing caution, a subtle but critical shift in aerial warfare psychology. Taken together, these angles demonstrate that the Mustang was more than a machine. It was a catalyst. Human skill, tactical ingenuity, engineering excellence, and leadership foresight combined to exploit its potential. Enemy perceptions and morale were just as important as physical performance in determining the outcome of encounters. The Mustang altered the rhythm of combat, forcing both sides to rethink assumptions and adjust strategies under pressure. By the spring of 1944, these factors converged to produce a transformative effect over Europe. The stage was set for pivotal missions in which Mustangs would escort bombers deep into Germany, directly confronting the Luftwaffe's best pilots and challenging their dominance. These encounters, intense and decisive, would soon crystallize in the climax/turning point, where the balance of air superiority was tested in real combat. By the spring of 1944, the P-51 Mustang had begun to prove itself in combat, but its true test lay ahead, the first major deep-penetration bombing raids into the heart of Germany. March 24, 1944, marked one of the earliest high-stakes missions for the new long-range escorts. Over 600 B-17 Flying Fortresses and B-24 Liberators prepared to strike aircraft factories in Berlin, escorted by a contingent of P-51 Mustangs flying from England. The Luftwaffe, alert and confident, awaited the American formation. Veteran Bf 109 pilots, many with hundreds of sorties behind them, assumed their standard roles: dive attacks on the bombers, coordinated strafing runs, and rapid retreats to avoid counterfire. From the moment the Mustangs broke through the clouds, the engagement began to shift the established balance. The German pilots found themselves facing an opponent they had underestimated. Unlike previous escorts, the Mustangs could climb rapidly to meet them at altitude, matching the 109s in speed and turning capability. When the German fighters attacked, Mustang pilots countered with well-timed dives and sustained fire, disrupting formations and forcing Luftwaffe aircraft into defensive maneuvers. Bombers previously exposed for minutes at a time were now protected by a mobile, aggressive shield. The psychological impact was immediate. German pilots reported confusion and frustration as Mustangs darted in and out of combat, appearing faster than anticipated, often disengaging before retaliation could be effective. Air engagements became a series of rapid, violent bursts, split-second decisions, bursts of gunfire, evasive rolls, and the deafening roar of Merlin engines filling the sky. Pilots on both sides were acutely aware of the stakes. Survival and strategic advantage hung in the balance. Among the Mustang pilots, some of the earliest aces began to emerge. Captain Charles "Chuck" Yeager, already noted for his daring, described the experience as controlling the air rather than fighting to survive it. For many young American aviators, the Mustang's performance instilled an unprecedented sense of mastery over the skies. The aircraft's ability to engage and then rapidly disengage forced German pilots to rethink standard dogfighting doctrine. Where the Luftwaffe once dictated the terms of combat, the Mustangs now threatened to dictate the outcome. The mission's outcome was unmistakable. Allied bombers suffered fewer losses than anticipated, with P-51s neutralizing a significant portion of the Luftwaffe threat. German pilots, who had anticipated relatively easy interceptions, found themselves repeatedly outmaneuvered. Debriefings after the raids revealed stunned accounts. Enemy fighters, confident in their superior numbers and experience, had been consistently forced to retreat. Intelligence officers noted the Mustangs' performance with growing concern, recognizing that the era of uncontested Luftwaffe air superiority was nearing its end. The March raid was only the beginning. Over the next several weeks, missions increased in scale and frequency. Mustang squadrons were tasked with escorting bombers over industrial complexes in Hamburg, Leipzig, and the Ruhr, each sortie reinforcing the aircraft's capabilities. Tactical lessons were quickly learned and applied. Formations were adjusted to maximize coverage, communication protocols improved, and pilots honed engagement techniques specific to countering the Luftwaffe's favored maneuvers. The Mustang was no longer an experiment. It had become an integral component of the air campaign. The intensity of these encounters was mirrored in German accounts. Luftwaffe veterans documented the growing challenge in detail. Pilots expressed amazement at the Mustang's speed and climbing ability, noting that conventional interception tactics often failed. Engineers on the German side began exploring modifications, attempting to regain lost performance. But the pace of innovation had shifted decisively. With every sortie, the Mustang proved itself not just a capable fighter, but a transformational tool, a machine that altered the tempo and expectations of aerial combat across the European theater. As the spring raids continued, the stage was set for a dramatic and decisive confrontation. The Mustang had established the principle. Allied bombers could penetrate deep into Germany under effective protection, and the Luftwaffe could no longer assume dominance in the skies. The tactical and psychological advantage was shifting. This period of intense, sustained combat set the tone for the coming months, where air battles would escalate in frequency, ferocity, and historical significance. The convergence of human skill, technological innovation, and strategic planning was coming to a head. The Mustang's first major missions had proven it could outpace Messerschmitts, protect bombers, and alter the Luftwaffe's approach to aerial engagements. Yet the story was far from over. The most dramatic encounters, the turning points that would cement the Mustang's reputation in the skies over Europe, were still to come. By May 1944, Mustang squadrons were fully integrated into the 8th Air Force's deep penetration bombing missions. One of the most pivotal engagements occurred on May 12, 1944, when over 1,000 bombers targeted the synthetic oil plants near Leipzig. More than 200 P-51 Mustangs from the 52nd and 339th Fighter Groups provided continuous escort, extending protection across the entire flight path. German intelligence had anticipated routine bomber raids, but the arrival of fast, high-altitude Mustang squadrons disrupted every calculation. The Luftwaffe responded aggressively. Jagdgeschwader 11 and 300, equipped with Bf 109s and FW 190s, attempted coordinated attacks in waves. But the Mustang's performance proved decisive. In multiple documented dogfights, German fighters found themselves unable to overtake the American planes. Mustang pilots employed energy tactics, climbing rapidly to gain altitude advantage, diving in high-speed passes, and then disengaging before the Bf 109s could counterattack. These maneuvers, combined with superior firepower, shattered the Luftwaffe's offensive rhythm. Accounts from both sides highlight the intensity of these encounters. German pilots described moments when Mustangs seemed to appear from nowhere, then vanish with impossible speed. Allied pilots, in turn, recounted the exhilaration of controlling engagements rather than reacting defensively. In the sky above central Germany, the balance of power was shifting. For the first time, American fighter pilots felt they could dictate the terms of combat, no longer merely escorting bombers, but actively neutralizing threats before they reached their targets. The tangible results were stark. Bomber losses during these missions were markedly lower than historical averages for deep raids. Aerial victory reports confirmed dozens of German aircraft destroyed or damaged in the engagements. Luftwaffe squadrons faced attrition not only in planes, but in morale, as experienced pilots were killed or forced to retreat, leaving less seasoned aviators to bear the brunt of subsequent missions. For many German units, the Mustang represented a technological and psychological challenge they could not overcome quickly, forcing command to reconsider deployment patterns, altitude preferences, and engagement tactics. In addition to tactical supremacy, the Mustang demonstrated a strategic multiplier effect. With bomber formations suffering fewer losses, the Allies were able to sustain a higher tempo of air raids. Industrial targets across Germany faced consistent disruption, and the Luftwaffe was stretched thin, struggling to defend multiple fronts while contending with a fighter it could neither outrun nor easily outfight. The Mustang had effectively turned the tables. Where once the Germans had dictated engagements, they now reacted to Allied initiatives. One remarkable moment occurred during the Leipzig raid, when a flight of Mustangs engaged a formation of 30 Bf 109s protecting the target. The encounter lasted over 10 minutes at altitudes exceeding 25,000 feet. Mustangs climbed, dove, and executed high-speed passes, achieving multiple confirmed kills while sustaining minimal damage. Reports from German pilots described confusion and frustration, acknowledging that their traditional tactics were insufficient against the Mustang's combination of speed, firepower, and maneuverability. The engagement symbolized a broader turning point in the air war, a clear demonstration that the Luftwaffe's superiority was no longer guaranteed. By late May, the pattern was unmistakable. Mustang escorts had proven capable of consistently protecting bombers, forcing the Luftwaffe into defensive postures and reducing losses across the Allied air campaign. The aircraft's performance validated the strategic decisions of Allied command and demonstrated the potential of technological innovation to redefine warfare. The human and psychological dimensions, confidence among Mustang pilots, fear among German adversaries, reinforced the aircraft's impact beyond mere numbers. The spring of 1944 marked a definitive turning point in the air war over Europe. The Mustang was no longer a promising prototype. It was an operational reality reshaping tactics, strategy, and morale. German pilots, once confident in their ability to intercept Allied formations with impunity, now faced an enemy that combined speed, endurance, and firepower in a way they had never encountered. The skies of Europe had changed, and with each successful escort mission, the path to Allied air supremacy became clearer. As the Mustang continued to escort bombers over Germany, the consequences were immediate and profound. The Luftwaffe struggled to respond, attrition mounted, and the psychological advantage firmly shifted to the Allies. The aircraft's dominance in the skies paved the way for the upcoming D-Day invasion, ensuring that Allied ground forces would face significantly less interference from enemy aircraft. The stage was now set to examine the aftermath, where the long-term consequences of the Mustang's introduction would reshape the war and the air strategies on both sides. The spring and summer of 1944 left no doubt. The P-51 Mustang had irrevocably changed the air war over Europe. Allied bomber formations, once vulnerable and often decimated deep in German territory, now reached their targets with significantly reduced losses. Mission reports from the 8th Air Force indicate that bomber attrition dropped by nearly half on missions escorted by Mustangs, a remarkable improvement compared to the same routes flown just a year prior. The difference was not only in the numbers, but in the effectiveness and morale of the crews. Pilots and gunners who had endured months of fear and uncertainty now operated with renewed confidence, knowing that the sleek, silver Mustangs above them could counter enemy fighters with lethal precision. The Luftwaffe, by contrast, faced a crisis of both material and morale. Experienced pilots, the backbone of Germany's air defense, were increasingly casualties of engagements they could no longer dominate. Squadrons like JG-11 and JG-300, which had previously executed deadly interception operations with skill and efficiency, struggled to adapt. Reports from Luftwaffe Command in Berlin reveal mounting frustration. Strategies that had worked for years, concentrated attacks, high-speed dives, coordinated formations, were now failing against an opponent that could dictate the terms of every encounter. Attrition rates rose, not only due to aircraft losses, but due to pilots forced into retreat or captured after forced landings behind enemy lines. The immediate consequences extended beyond individual missions. Air superiority, long assumed by the Luftwaffe over much of Western Europe, was increasingly contested. Allied planners exploited this advantage, scheduling more frequent and deeper raids with confidence that the Mustangs could provide effective coverage. The bombing of key industrial and logistical targets became more precise and consistent. As formation cohesion improved and crews could focus on navigation and targeting rather than defensive survival. Critical infrastructure, from oil refineries to rail networks, suffered unprecedented disruption, accelerating the strain on German war production. Casualty statistics from these operations underscore the scale of the shift. By mid-1944, Allied reports confirmed dozens of Luftwaffe aircraft destroyed per raid, while Mustang losses remained comparatively low. While exact numbers varied, historians estimate that the introduction of Mustangs as long-range escorts prevented the loss of hundreds of bombers and thousands of aircrew over several months, a tangible and measurable impact on the strategic bombing campaign. The Mustang's influence extended beyond tactics and numbers. It reshaped the psychological landscape of the air war. German pilots, accustomed to dominance, experienced a growing sense of caution and even fear. Debriefings from surviving Luftwaffe units describe a pervasive anxiety. The once predictable rhythm of intercepting bombers was replaced by uncertainty. Any engagement with Mustang-protected formations became a gamble, with high-speed, high-altitude maneuvers making victory far from guaranteed. Conversely, Allied pilots reported a profound shift in confidence and morale. The psychological advantage, often overlooked in historical accounts, proved decisive. Men who believed in their ability to survive and succeed were more effective, coordinated, and resilient under fire. Leadership decisions also reflected the changing balance. Luftwaffe commanders attempted to concentrate forces and adjust interception strategies, but the Mustang's performance consistently neutralized these efforts. Allied leadership, meanwhile, capitalized on the advantage, expanding bombing schedules and targeting high-value sites with unprecedented coordination. The introduction of the Mustang demonstrated the interplay between technology, human skill, and strategy. How a single innovation, properly deployed, could alter the trajectory of an entire theater of war. By the end of the spring campaign, the air war over Germany had fundamentally changed. The Mustang had done more than escort bombers. It had disrupted the Luftwaffe's operational tempo, diminished its morale, and established the Allies as the dominant force in Western skies. This dominance would play a crucial role in the coming D-Day invasion, ensuring that Allied ground forces would encounter significantly reduced resistance from the air. The immediate aftermath set the stage for the broader consequences of air superiority, a shift that would resonate through the final campaigns in Europe. As 1944 progressed, the Mustang's impact on the European air war became unmistakable and long-lasting. Beyond immediate mission success, the aircraft fundamentally altered the strategic landscape. Luftwaffe losses mounted steadily, with veteran pilots disproportionately affected. By mid-1944, German air intelligence noted that the proportion of experienced fighter aces was declining rapidly. Replacements, often younger and less skilled, struggled to counter Mustang escorts, leading to a vicious cycle. More losses, less experienced pilots, and diminishing effectiveness in defending key industrial targets. The attrition was both quantitative and qualitative. Aircraft destroyed in combat, forced landings behind enemy lines, and mechanical where from constant high-intensity sorties all reduced operational capability. German units faced a stark reality. The Mustang's superior speed, climb rate, and endurance prevented them from controlling airspace as they had for years. Commanders attempted tactical adjustments, altitude variations, night interception, and increased reliance on anti-aircraft artillery, but the advantage of Allied long-range fighters persisted. The Luftwaffe's inability to neutralize the Mustang directly contributed to the erosion of Germany's defensive posture in the sky. For the Allies, the Mustang's success unlocked strategic flexibility. Long-range escort allowed bomber streams to target previously unreachable locations, disrupting oil production, transportation hubs, and munitions factories deep within Germany. This sustained pressure accelerated the degradation of German war production, weakening both material and logistical capacity. Crucially, it also safeguarded the human capital of bomber crews, ensuring that trained airmen could continue missions without the catastrophic attrition rates experienced in earlier campaigns. The P-51, therefore, was not just a technological marvel. It was a force multiplier that amplified the effectiveness of the entire Allied air strategy. The Mustang's influence extended to the upcoming D-Day invasion. By establishing air superiority over France and northern Germany, the Allies could limit Luftwaffe interference with amphibious landings and ground operations. Reconnaissance flights, close air support, and supply missions all benefited from the reduction in enemy aircraft activity. German planners, aware of this growing imbalance, faced increasingly constrained options. Resources that could have been devoted to defending the front lines were instead diverted to countering Mustang-protected bombers, often with limited success. Morale, too, was profoundly affected. Among Allied crews, the presence of Mustangs fostered confidence and cohesion. Pilots reported that knowing the Mustang escorts were above them allowed for better focus on navigation, bombing accuracy, and formation discipline. On the German side, the psychological effect of confronting an aircraft that could consistently outpace and outmaneuver their best fighters was demoralizing. Reports from Luftwaffe pilots and commanders indicate that caution and hesitation replaced boldness and aggression, subtly shifting the psychological balance in favor of the Allies. In the months that followed, the Mustang became a symbol of technological and operational innovation. Its success validated the concept of long-range escort fighters, influencing post-war aircraft design and air combat doctrine. The lessons learned, integrating speed, range, firepower, and pilot training into a cohesive system, would resonate through decades of military aviation development. More immediately, the Mustang ensured that Allied bombing campaigns maintained tempo and effectiveness, directly contributing to the weakening of the German war machine in the crucial months leading up to the Normandy invasion. By late 1944, the cumulative effect was undeniable. Luftwaffe losses, both in aircraft and experienced personnel, had reached a critical point. Allied bomber forces operated with reduced risk, and air superiority in Western Europe was effectively consolidated. The Mustang had proven itself not only as a technological triumph, but as a decisive factor in the outcome of the air war. Its introduction marked a turning point from attritional struggle to strategic advantage, reshaping the trajectory of World War II over Europe. The story of the Mustang's impact is therefore not only about performance statistics or aerial victories. It is about the transformation of air warfare itself. Speed, range, firepower, and human skill converge to shift the balance of power, forcing adaptation and revealing the limits of even the most experienced adversaries. This enduring influence sets the stage for the final reflective consideration of what the Mustang's entry into combat truly meant. For history, for aviation, and for the men who flew and fought beneath its wings. The story of the P-51 Mustang is more than a tale of speed, firepower, or technical innovation. It is a story of transformation. In the skies over Europe, it changed the rules of engagement, redefined what was possible for bomber protection, and shifted the balance of morale, skill, and strategy. The Mustang allowed men to fight with confidence, to act decisively rather than reactively, and to impose order on what had long been a chaotic and deadly domain. Its impact rippled far beyond individual dogfights. The aircraft enabled sustained bombing campaigns deep into Germany, reducing attrition, disrupting production, and creating the conditions necessary for the success of operations like D-Day. It demonstrated the power of engineering married to human skill, that technological innovation, when applied thoughtfully, can multiply effectiveness in ways that numbers alone cannot capture. For the Luftwaffe, the Mustang was a revelation and a warning. Pilots who had once laughed at the idea of an American fighter capable of challenging their Bf-109s were forced to confront a new reality. Dominance in the sky is never guaranteed. Confidence, experience, and tradition could be disrupted by speed, strategy, and ingenuity. The psychological effect of facing an opponent that consistently outperformed expectations proved as decisive as any technical advantage. Ultimately, the Mustang stands as a symbol of how warfare evolves. It reminds us that human courage and ingenuity, combined with technological innovation, can reshape the battlefield and alter the course of history. The silver silhouettes of Mustangs cutting across the European sky were more than machines. They were instruments of change, harbingers of a new era in aerial combat, and protectors of men whose lives and missions depended on them. As the war pressed onward, the lessons of the Mustang endured, in aircraft design, in tactical doctrine, and in the understanding that innovation, speed, and adaptability can tip the scales in moments of crisis. Its legacy is a testament to the convergence of human skill, engineering brilliance, and the relentless drive to survive and succeed under the harshest conditions imaginable. And in those cold European skies, the P-51 Mustang proved one immutable truth. Even the most confident opponent can be outpaced, outmaneuvered, and ultimately outmatched.